meeting begins, we will have an invocation offered by Mr. Waddington, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
God our Father, as we gather for this meeting tonight, give us guidance and wisdom to make the proper decisions. Amen.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Professor, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Twine? Here. Mr. Lockhart?
Here.
Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Mr. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Brady?
Here.
Ms. Lloyd? Here. Mr. Poole?
There.
Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meeting of February 12, 2018. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move that we accept the minutes of the February 12th meeting. Dispense with formal reading.
Second.
Got a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Turn now to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address any of our lot of agenda items tonight, please step to the microphone, share with us your thoughts, name and address.
Sharon Johnson, 1139 Fifth Street. I'd like to comment on the legislation for a grant application for $1 million project for the pathway for the landing out on Cleveland Road. And the city's matching that grant of $567,000. ODNR is matching it $493,000. Out of the Sandusky's match, $567,000, $300,000 is coming out of the Issue 8 infrastructure. $200,000 is coming out of the general fund, capital fund. And $67,000 is for the city supplying in-house construction, engineering, and inspection for this project. Cedar Fair, they're chipping in $15,000. That's a joke. That's a joke, folks. I'm not happy with this at all. Not happy. As a taxpayer, what this Issue 8 originally intended to be. We didn't sign up for a pathway on Cleveland Road. This cuts into our streets, street money, and it's just not fair. There's no justification for this. And this is going, that Cleveland Road project out there is going to be a money pit. Build it, and everybody else will pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the commission on regular agenda items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Commission. Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way, Sandusky, Ohio. My concern also is with item number 2 on the regular agenda, which is the grant application from ODNR for the Phase 1 of the landing project, which is based on the city's documents, what the city's calling a drive from Cleveland Road back to the southernmost point of the former runway from Griffin Airport. I assume that, it doesn't mention it in the paperwork, but I assume there's also going to be a bike lane attached to that. So when you get to that point of the agenda, maybe we can get a little bit more finer detail on that project. This particular item came up last Saturday at the Coffee with Commissioners. Again, it was brought up that, here we go again, we're spending, city income tax dollars, capital funds on a project that's not even in the city limits. The majority of that property is private property. It's outside the city limits. There's a small swath of property that the city, I don't even think they own it, but they control it through a easement through Metro Parks and some conservation group that was involved a few years ago out there by the former drive-in theater. So none of that property really belongs to the city of Sandusky. It's just through an easement. If I'm reading the paperwork right, it looks like once we help pay for this project, it then becomes the responsibility of the city of Sandusky or Metro Parks to maintain it. We're going to get an easement once this part of the project is done. Certainly, this is not the last time that Cedar Fair is going to come to the city for money on this project, because this is just Phase 1. A very minute portion of that entire project. So there's probably going to be more money that's going to be asked for in the future. I asked a question at a recent meeting, Eric Whoopser was there and a couple city staff, where's Metro Parks buy-in on this? Where's their contribution? Where is the financial contribution from whatever city limits this project is in? And the answer I got back, and I buy into it, is that they're working on that the city's working on that, but I'm not seeing it in any of this legislation that's being brought forward today. The other point I want to make is that this is being tabbed as part of the Sandusky Bay Pathway Project. Sandusky Bay Pathway Project is 12 years old. There's areas in Sandusky in the limits that have not been touched as part of that Sandusky Bay Pathway Plan. And now this project is leapfrogging those other projects that should have been started on before that project out there at the landing. Thank you very much. Appreciate your consideration.
Anyone else wishing to address the commission? If not, then we will turn to a presentation by Maria Muratori, who is our economic development specialist, and she's going to talk about the housing program and future initiatives along those same lines.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Commission. Tonight, I would like to review our Housing Development and Beautification Program for 2016 and 2017. I'd also like to preview 2018 programs. We do expect to release the programs on March 5th, 2018, so 1 week from today, and just briefly touch on some other housing initiatives. And some of you may have seen this presentation or a version of it at the Business Roundtable in November. Stuart? I can't edit. Should I just use that? Okay, so just beginning with 2016, we had pretty good results in 2016. Excluding down payment assistance, we committed about $120,000, so that was substantial redevelopment, exterior repairs, and that led to total project costs, again, excluding down payment assistance, of about $450,000. So we leveraged private funds 3.7 times. And then in addition to that, we committed $90,000 toward down payment assistance. So in substantial and exterior repair, we touched 63 homes. And then with landscaping, we touched an additional 17 homes. Now there is a little bit of overlap as some of the substantial and exterior repair projects would also apply for landscaping. But we had pretty good results in 2016. Oops. Thank you. Just diving into the 2016 down payment numbers. 30 homes were purchased using the grants for down payment assistance. Of those, 27 were first-time home buyers. That was about 90%, so you can see it's very popular for first-time home buyers, although that is not a requirement. 11 of the 30 homes were previously vacant, so 37%, and 8 of the 30 were home buyers from outside the city limits, or about 27%. The average purchase price of the homes purchased using a down payment assistance grant in 2016 was $85,000. Again, these were good numbers. But when we jump forward to 2017, you can see that the momentum did actually pick up quite a bit. Now, these numbers are a little bit different from what I showed in November, because we did have to issue some rescind letters for people who did not finish their projects. But the numbers are still really good and tell a great story about the momentum with these programs. So, ex down payment assistance, we committed $210,000, and that led to projects with a total cost of $1.25 million, ex down payment assistance. So the leverage number did increase over 2 turns to 5.8 times in 2017 from 2016. And then in addition, we did $130,000 in down payment assistance. So in 2017, for substantial and exterior repair, we touched 109 homes. That was versus 63 in 2016, and landscaping was an additional 45 homes. So more dollars were committed, almost 1.6 times more money. And the projects got bigger. The projects, we did over 3 times the value in total project costs in 17 as we did in 16. As I said, we got higher leverage of 5.8 times, and the down payment assistance dollars committed went up 44%. And then just diving into the down payment assistance numbers, in 2017, we did 51 total homes. That's up from 30 in 16, 45 homes. 45 of the 51 were first-time home buyers, again, a very high percentage. 23 were previously vacant, 45%. And 22 of the 51 were home buyers from outside the city limits, so about 27%. The average purchase price was very similar as it was in 2016. It went up about $1,000, so it did increase. And I just wanted to highlight some of the notable projects in 2017 by showing some befores and afters. This is 1015 Erie Street, before and after. This was a re-siding project. 122 Campbell Street, painting project. 221 42nd Street, they did a nice new red front door. 428 Columbus Avenue, this is a prominent address. This home was on the market for some time, and the homeowner is investing pretty significantly. Most notably in these pictures, you can see the landscaping, but the homeowner also did front stair repair, some tuck pointing, and porch repair work. 1103 Erie Street, before and after. Our dollars were specifically to help with the remodeling of the porch and a new walkway toward the house and landscaping. However, this is a total renovation project. 604 Taylor Street, this is a new front porch, and this was actually a land bank house, so this is a nice story of somebody acquiring the house and putting some dollars into it and to improving it. 505 Huron Street, this is actually a brand new build. So that may have been the only brand new build. Well, we did have a Habitat for Humanity home last year as well, so we have a couple of these a year. And then I believe this is the last one, 745 Sycamore Street. This was a complete renovation and a transformation to a duplex from a single-family home. And this one actually came to commission in April of 2017 because they spent enough per unit that they were actually a little over $10,000. So it did come to commission. Tiffany Taylor from our IT department helped me try to create a GIS map that shows 2016 and 2017 graphically. Again, in 2016, we did 110 projects, and these dots show substantial redevelopment, down payment assistance, landscaping, and exterior repair throughout the city in 2016. In 2017, there are a lot more dots, 205 projects, and again, just showing the various categories for 2017. And then this is a map that combines the two. So you can see we've touched a lot of homes all over the city in the 2 years that these programs have been available to our constituents. 315 projects throughout the 2 years, $550,000 in funds, $1.7 million in total project costs, ex down payment assistance, and 5.1 times leverage. So just looking forward to 2018, we expect to have $300,000 this year to distribute for the housing programs citywide. And again, that will be available March 5th. And in addition, we have a one-time amount of $600,000 that we've already begun to use that money, and that's available for the model block areas. It's $100,000 per neighborhood. The purpose of this is to concentrate these dollars into these specific neighborhoods to really have a high impact. And I'm showing the neighborhoods as the South Side, the Garden District, the Cove District, south of Kilbourne, 1st to 5th, and the West End. And about $535,000 remains of that $600,000, so that's ongoing. And we are kind of finalizing some of our program modifications for 2018. We're going to be reviewing the programs in the next few days to kind of finalize those changes. We do think we might increase the dollars for substantial redevelopment. That definitely picked up from 16 to 17, but we think maybe we need to increase those dollars a little bit there. We also think we're going to combine exterior and landscaping so that you can add landscaping onto exterior repair projects instead of making it a separate category. And one other thing that we would like to do is add a disincentive. We don't want people to get these grants and have funds committed and then have them not complete the project. So we will ask that if for some reason you do need, if we have to issue a rescind letter, that you won't be able to apply the next year, but the year after that you'll be able to apply. We just don't want to tie up money that other constituents might have access to. And then just briefly touching on one other housing initiative, we expect to create a residential tax abatement program in partnership with the Sandusky City Schools. And the purpose of this will be to stimulate new housing starts and substantial investment in existing homes, and also to attract new residents. We expect it to be a 10-year, 75% tax abatement on the construction of new housing and the restoration of existing housing. We would need to repeal our existing downtown CRA area and institute a new citywide residential CRA for large-scale rehab and, again, new housing. So just a few closing comments. Again, the momentum, the positive momentum, especially in the residential housing market in Sandusky, continues. We've got new schools being built. It's our bicentennial year. And we've got continued investment by a variety of stakeholders in the community. So it is an exciting time to own a home in Sandusky. And I do want to just finish with one other anecdote. I did have a conversation with a developer who's interested in buying the 18 single-family residential lots in the West Cove subdivision. He wants to build speculative homes, and I think that'll be a great addition to our existing inventory. I think that's a product that will be very popular. And what I understand is this developer already owns a nearby home to the area he's familiar with and invested in the community. He's excited and he wants to be a part of the revival. So I think that's really good news. And then lastly, there's some contact information for us in community development. Matt Lasko, Ariel Blanca, and myself are the ones most directly involved with this program. But this program really relies on a lot of people throughout the city. The building department, historically, we've worked with Alicia Schrank, and it'll be Deb Leslie going forward. Code enforcement, Angie Kostopoulos and Dante Ship both help us in checking code violations and such. Talon Floor and planning helps us with pictures. Jackie Jessberger in finance writes a lot of checks for this program. And Deb Eversole in community development, our administrative assistant, really works hard for us on these programs. So again, one more time, the new programs will be available March 5th, and that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Muratori. Questions or comments, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Poole.
I want to say very good job. These numbers are very encouraging to see, especially the numbers on home buyers from outside the city. When those numbers going up, it shows that the project is working, this program's working very well. Thank you for the work. I realize this is not easy.
Thank you.
Additionally, I did want to comment the initiative with the schools. It pays off not just for us, but also for them. You'll find that the vast majority of students at the school for which the school gets, I believe, about $6,000 a child comes from people that live here. So adding to the number of outside residents coming here is excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? I too want to thank you and echo Mr. Poole's comments. I know this is a labor-intensive process. You're dealing with a lot of new home buyers, people who are unsure about the process, so that takes a lot of time, and you are helping these people become homeowners, and that's a good thing if that's what they want to do and that's where they are in their lives. Certainly not to say that everyone needs to be a homeowner, but these folks obviously want to do so, and you're providing more than just the financial assistance. You're providing the advice and the guidance and the mentoring that's necessary to be able to complete the process. So for all of that extra effort, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Thank you. I know we have another presentation, but I want to change up the order here, and Mr. Brady has a proclamation to present to some representatives from serving our seniors who are here, and I understand May McClure. Erie County, what did I say?
Serving our seniors.
Erie County serving our seniors. Oh, okay. Well,
Erie County Senior Center.
oh, okay.
Having a senior moment.
This is why we have 6 other commissioners, to make sure that you don't make these mistakes. So thank you for being here. And I understand May McClure is going to present or accept the proclamation, and Mr. Brady is going to read it.
Yes. For a photo opportunity too.
Should I get up and get them all?
Yeah. Thank you.
I actually have a proclamation suitable for framing, and I'll read from my prompt. Whereas on March 22nd, 1972, President Richard Nixon signed into law a measure amending the Older Americans Act of 1965 and established a national nutrition program for seniors 60 years and older. Whereas Meals on Wheels America established the March for Meals campaign in 2002 to recognize the historic month, the importance of the Older Americans Act nutrition programs, both congregate and home delivered, and raise awareness about the escalating problem of senior hunger in America. And whereas the 2018 observances of March for Meals celebrate 16 years of providing an opportunity to support Meals on Wheels programs, which deliver vital and critical services by donating, volunteering, and raising awareness about senior hunger and isolation. And whereas Meals on Wheels programs provided by the Erie County Senior Center of Sandusky have proudly served our community admirably for more than 40 years with both congregate and home delivered meals. And whereas volunteers for Meals on Wheels programs in Sandusky, Ohio are the backbone of the program, and they not only deliver nutritious meals to seniors and individuals with disabilities who are at significant risk of hunger and isolation, but also provide caring, concern, and attention to their welfare. And whereas the Meals on Wheels programs in Sandusky provide nutritious meals to seniors throughout the area, which help them maintain their health and independence, thereby preventing unnecessary falls, hospitalizations, and/or premature institutionalization. And whereas Meals on Wheels programs provide a powerful socialization opportunity for millions of seniors to help combat loneliness and isolation, and deserve recognition for their contributions they have made and will continue to make to local communities, our state, and our nation. Now therefore, I, Richard R. Brady, Vice President of the Sandusky City Commission, do hereby proclaim March of 2018 as the 16th annual March for Meals Month, and urge every citizen to take this month to honor our Meals on Wheels program, the seniors they serve, and the volunteers who care for them, to help enrich our entire community and help combat senior hunger and isolation in America. Dated this 26th day of February 2018. Thank you for your work. Well, should I leap to the counter?
Sorry, I'll fill in for you, I'm close.
Too much of a senior to do that. Thanks.
On behalf of the Senior Center, we thank the commissioners for acknowledging the importance of this program.
Thank you, very important.
And you're all invited to come during our month of March for Meals, to ride along anytime and check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also come and help serve.
Not just eat, sir.
Well, you could eat there.
I probably should.
You know,
You can too.
I'm not old enough yet. I don't think so.
We don't have no age limit.
Well, you know, this is how it goes at these meetings, so I'm cautioning Mr. Brady right now. He threw the first punch. There will be others to follow.
Thank you.
Nobody knocked out yet.
Mr. Lockhart, you made an important observation, and you wanted to make a presentation in honor of Black History Month, so if you would, please.
Yes, this is the end of Black History Month, and so I just wanted to recognize some of the, all of the past commissioners that we have that were African American. And starting off in 1974, in the 70s, bell bottoms and disco music was popular. Women, African Americans, gays, all continuing their fight for equality at that time. In 1974, Tom Darden, as many of you know, is still with us. A great leader, was our first African American city commissioner. And then following him was Al Mason, Leroy Sizemore, Danny Edmond, Brett Fuqua, Purvis Brown Jr., Deidre Cole, and Wes Poole to my left down there, if you would pay attention, wave. And then to my right, Miss Naomi Twine, and then the last but not least, myself. And what I want to say is that Black History Month, it's not a separate history, it's American history. And I think it's important that everybody understand that, because it has a great impact on our next generation of children that are coming before us. It's their values and how they're going to perceive all people. And so, moving forward, I'd like us all to move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lockhart. Well said. I've known all but one of those characters, and what a cast of characters that's been. We'll leave it at that. We have a second presentation tonight, or public hearing. I'm going to open up a public hearing, and Erin Blanca is going to present our 2018 Community Development Block Grant Program. And Ariel is our Community Development Manager, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of Commission. This will be the first of two public hearings concerning the city's 2018 Community Development Block Grant Program year. A consolidated Plan Advisory Committee meeting was held on February 16th. As an entitlement city, Sandusky directly receives an allocation of funds from the Department of Housing and Development to carry out selected activities within our community. These eligible activities include, but are not limited to, acquisition, rehabilitation, demolition, code enforcement, economic development activities, public facility projects, infrastructure improvements, and planning activities. Under this grant, there are certain requirements which cannot be exceeded. In general, these include a maximum of 20% of the allocation to be expended on administrative and planning expenses, and a maximum of 15% of the allocation to be expended on public services during the program year. 70% of the funds must benefit low to moderate income persons or households. All of the funds must meet one of three national objectives. These include low to moderate income benefit, elimination of slum and blight, and community urgent need. Sandusky anticipates an allocation of approximately $650,000 of new funds for program year 2018, which will begin July 1st and run through June 30th, 2019. The following activities were budgeted in the 2017 program year, which is currently underway. Program administration, $115,000. Fair housing, $9,000. Infrastructure projects, $365,000. Parks and ADA improvements, $120,000. Clearance and demolition, $148,000. Code enforcement, $150,000. Sandusky Transit Waiting Environmental Improvement Program, $10,000. The Erie County Health Department 211 Program, $8,000. The Erie County Senior Center Meals on Wheels Program, $15,000. Center for Cultural Awareness Citizen Circle Program, $10,000. City of Sandusky Recreation Summer Playground Program, $10,000. The OGO Reach Program, $15,000, and then Public Facilities, $510,000. Subrecipient funding applications became available on February 16th and are due to the Community Development Department no later than 12 p.m. on March 9th. A draft of the plan will be available on March 23rd, after which there will be a 30-day comment period. The draft plan will be available for review at City Hall as well as the Sandusky Library. There will be a second Consolidated Plan Advisory Committee meeting on April 6th, and then on April 23rd, there will be a second public hearing held at 5 p.m. during the Commission meeting. Public input on community needs relating to CDBG funding can be submitted by written correspondence to the Community Development Department located at 222 Meg Street, Sandusky, Ohio, or they can be emailed to me at ablanca@ci.sandusky.oh.us or by phone at 419-627-5847. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Blanca. Commissioners, questions or comments? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak on the 2018 CDBG program?
Sharon Johnson, 1139 Fifth Street. I'm putting in my wish list for more demos and more streets to be done, to maybe even increase from last year that we spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Anyone else?
Barbara Linden, I live out to Merwood Village. I'm here to promote the senior center. You know, we have the Meals on Wheels. March 1st, we're going to have a parade down through town to promote it. The 17th of March, we're having a rockathon out to the mall. Anybody that likes to rock, get yourself a group together and come on out and have a competition. We have a ball. But let me tell you, these people down at the senior center, we have a man that just turned 98 years old today. And he is amazing. These people are miracles. Every one of them are miracles. I feel honored to come down there and volunteer to be with them. I just want to let you know, we have a senior center, and anybody is welcome. Nobody's turned away. Nobody goes hungry. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the CDBG hearing. Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak to this issue? If not, then I'm going to declare that hearing closed. And, Commissioners, I would appreciate a motion to accept the communications in our package.
So, second.
Then a motion second. Without objection, motion to be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved. So we have a number of consent agenda items tonight. I'm going to see if I can't make it 2 meetings in a row, or I get this right. Maybe I got it right the last meeting.
When was the first one?
Well, I did once get it right. Ms. Kresser wrote the instructions out, so I got it right. But, Commissioners, first of all, is there anyone who wishes to remove any of the proposed consent agenda items? If not, then Ms. Kresser, would you present the consent agenda items?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item A is approval of the codification supplements for updating the Code of Ordinances for the City of Sandusky. Item B is a payment to Imix Technologies Incorporated for the annual support and maintenance fees for the city's payroll management system. Item C is for the purchase of a backup server from Dell Marketing for the water and sewer departments. Item D is the purchase of a backup server from Dell Marketing for the police department. Item E is the acceptance of 8 parcels into the city's land reutilization program. Item F is authorizing the sale of property located at 910 South Meadow Drive as part of the city's land reutilization program. Item G is approval of a change order with Republic Services for year 2 of a contract for refuse and recycling collection program. Item H is authorization to dispose of items from the Sandusky Police Department. Item I consists of 3 pieces of legislation for encroachment licenses for Haven Fun LLC. And the first is for retention of a raised patio area for outdoor dining. Second is retention of an existing awning and retention of a ground level patio area for additional outdoor dining. Item J is an agreement with Direct Energy Business LLC for participation in the demand response program for the Big Island Waterworks property. Those are all the consent agenda items.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kresser. Someone who cares to make a motion in that regard?
So moved.
Well, no,
Right.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Floyd.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the consent agenda items A through J and declaring that all ordinances and/or resolutions as drafted and presented to the City Commission under the consent agenda shall take effect in accordance with the section reflected in the ordinances and/or resolutions, whether it be in accordance with Section 13 or 14 of the City Charter.
Been a motion second. Discussion. I do just want to note there's a lot of important work that goes into all of the items that are on here. I don't mean to pass over the importance of those items. I know a lot of folks in many different departments work hard to make that happen, but we want to be able to make sure that we have time here to discuss the items that need more public attention. These are ones that the commission all believes should be passed without a lot of discussion. And generally speaking, what the pattern I've tried to observe is that if it's a new item to the commission, completely new, I think we want to discuss that so the public gets a feel for that and the commission can discuss it. But these are by and large routine items that come up almost every couple of months and every year to be certain. So that's just part of how the selection process goes. Unless there are additional comments, Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Twine? Or, I'm sorry, Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinances and resolutions.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Those resolutions and ordinances are adopted. Would you present item number 1, please, Mrs. Cresser?
Yes, item 1 is a resolution approving and ratifying the submission of a grant application to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for financial assistance through the Clean Ohio Trails Fund grant program for the first phase of the Landing Park project, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brady.
I'd ask Mr. Klein to give us we probably give him the microphone for the next half hour or so because he has 7 of the 11 items on this agenda. But the first item, number 1, I would ask you to give us an explanation on, Mr. Klein, but specifically if you'd share with us how much of that land is in the city of Sandusky?
Yes, sir. Through Mr. President, and probably with the assistance of City Manager, in getting into more of the discussion on this, but this project is the first phase of the project, the plan that was accepted by this commission a month ago, and the presentation that was given 2 months ago in December of last year. We obviously hear over and over that we don't want plans just sitting on shelves, so I can't imagine moving any more quickly on implementing the first phase of a project, which is the pathway that would be leading from Cleveland Road back to the node where the 2 east-west runway and the north-south runways existed previously at the Griffin Airport just north of the Sports Center property. I probably did make a typo in here when I said drive entrance. But the reason that the drive entrance is listed on here is because Cedar Fair has committed to improving the drive entrance back to their facility, which was originally going to be a driveway, just going from Cleveland Road back to the Sports Center Phase 2 facility. They've agreed to enhance that, improve that, make it so that it would hold up to more traffic and be used not only as an entrance to their property, but also as an entrance that would go back to this landing park project on that north-south runway. Their contribution on that, which is shown on the agenda item, is over $700,000. So in addition to their $15,000, they're also contributing that $700,000 towards that improvement as well. Now, a portion of that they would have paid for anyway, but that's cost increases that they're also incurring. As far as the project being inside or outside of the city, the entire project that's submitted on this grant application is within the city municipal boundary. There's not any of it that would be outside of the city boundary. It is on Cedar Fair property, but we are in discussions with Cedar Fair at this time as to whether or not they would donate this portion of their property to us, or whether they would grant us easements through their property to ensure that the multi-use path does get through and connect to the landing project, and more importantly to the Sandusky Bay pathway. Again, this is the first portion of the landing park project that allows us the opportunity to apply for additional grant dollars to continue the Sandusky Bay pathway and connect it from the east boundary all the way to the existing pathway that is up Cleveland Road. I'm sorry, up Cedar Point Drive.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Klein. Anything to add, Mr. Webster? He said it sounds like he was anticipating you might have something to add.
Through the commission president, I think Director Klein handled it quite well. The only thing that I would answer, which was not necessarily the question answered or question asked by the commissioner, but to respond to another of Mr. Schwanger's questions related to the pathway plan. Ultimately, the 2006 pathway plan is being updated currently and does run from the west side of the city limits to the east side of the city limits. What the landing project did was took advantage of the fact that when that pathway plan was completed, the Griffin Airport site was still an airport. And so with the impending Cedar Point Sports Center project, knew that was a great opportunity to connect from the city limits through the Griffin site, which is predominantly in the city limits where the pathway will run, to the wonderful Metro Park properties to the east as an advantage for city residents. We did that planning project last year, as Director Klein mentioned, with the financial support of the Erie Metro Parks and Cedar Point. And then this year are updating the original pathway plan that will connect up and link with that pathway plan. But I think it's important to note, because he mentioned that we're using the funds for the pathway, which were committed as part of the Bicentennial Vision Plan and are actually separate from the local infrastructure commitments that we made for Issue 8 in the campaign, that in 2019, we actually intend to move forward on 3 segments of the Sandusky Bay pathway. One of those is Venice Road, which will run from approximately Margaritaville on the north side of Venice to Edgewater Drive. Another of which is Shoreline Drive, which will run along the limits of Shoreline Drive in the center of the city. And then this pathway. So we actually feel, as we begin in earnest to implement the pathway as a major project that the public very much supported as part of the Bicentennial Vision Plan, that we're very careful in looking at how to make sure we're doing projects on the west side, the center of the city, and the east side. So we feel strongly that this is a good part of a project that is meant to be citywide and regional in nature.
Questions or comments, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Poole.
Yeah, just a couple questions. This is phase 1 of a project that will go where? Yeah. When's the next phase is gonna happen? What's the financing for those and how much is it gonna be?
Mr. President, yeah, this is the first phase. It takes the multi-use path from Cleveland Road, wraps it around the west side of the Sports Center Phase 2 property, and then terminates.
I see what it does here. I'm looking at the maps, the red line on the picture. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what I'm interested in is I'm spending $500 and some thousand today on what you say is Cedar Point's property, that they may eventually or somehow or another either give us an easement or give it to us. And this is the first phase. What's the next 2 phases and when do we see those?
Yes. So we are.
How many other phases are left?
We don't anticipate getting notification of award of this grant until late this year, October, November timeframe. So even though it's the first phase, it is about a year for them to make decisions, and the money wouldn't even show up until 2019.
Okay.
So we have time to make those acquisitions, but more importantly, we have time to develop that planning effort on sequential on how to sequence the projects and how to best sequence the projects to be able to apply for additional trails funding through the state and the federal government. There are many important grant opportunities out there. It's just a matter of making sure we can maximize those and plan them accordingly. So I can't tell you exactly where the second phase is going to be, but what I can tell you is that we do anticipate the next phase as soon as we find out about the next grant opportunity that's out there in subsequent years.
Commissioners, additional questions or comments?
Through the commission president, just in addition to Director Klein said, we have met very recently with the Metro Park, Cedar Fair, and Environmental Design Group, the consultant, to look at ultimately how future funding, which we hope through tax increment financing in the second phase of the Sports Center, can accelerate some of those phases that would ultimately run from Pipe Creek, where Erin mentioned, to this leg, and then potentially heading east, although we want to contain our funding to the extent possible within the city limits and look to the Metro Parks and other projects to make that final connection into the Metro Park. So we are actively looking at what those phases will be, and we're, in addition to that, identifying sources outside of the funds from the capital dollars that are dedicated for the pathway so that we can leverage them further.
So, Mr. Klein, I think it's important, and I want to get you in on this conversation too, Mr. Harris, to talk about this. As I understand it, we would be ineligible for the grant funding if we didn't either own it outright by way of a donation or own it by way of an easement. Correct. Is that correct? That's what I understand to be the case. So, Mr. Blistrom, you're nodding, yes, that's correct. Now, Mr. Harris, we need to go back to Real Estate 101, because it gets a little confusing, because people think often, I understand why, we think of fee simple absolute. Piece of property, out in the country, no easements, no pipes, no drilling, no nothing, no sidewalks, and that's real simple. But as you move into more congested areas, what we find is that the ownership gets divided into lots and lots of different pieces. But that's all ownership. And an ownership, and I'm asking you to confirm this because you're a law director, an easement is a form of ownership which is recorded on the title, and you have the absolute right to use that. And the person who's named the property is titled, doesn't have the right to stop you. So that is, in fact, a bankable form of ownership. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. Through you, Commission President, to the Commission and the folks at home and in the audience, this pathway, from west to east, we're going to run into as we get closer to downtown or, First Street area, even on Venice Road, areas that are owned by individuals who may come to the city and say, we're not putting a pathway here, but we have plotted this out and we do have easement rights on a lot of these parcels. And you're right, Commission President, an easement basically is an equitable right to use land. You may not pay taxes on it, but the city as citizens have a right to ingress, egress, use it for utilities, use it for walkways and the like on certain properties.
I think, Mr. Harris. Mr. Klein, I think we had this budgeted in part of our capital budget, did we not?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, additional questions or comments?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, this
Paul.
$500,000 was budgeted, is that what you're
I
saying?
believe so, yes.
Okay. I just want to make just a final comment, just recognize from the comments made by citizens, we're being asked to on faith, commit $500,000 to a pathway that leads to nowhere, that may become something that we saw the picture of her before, which is fine. But just realize the uneasiness on the part of citizens is probably reasonable. And the fact that we, out there on Cleveland Road, when this is done, we don't have any access to it. We don't have a bike path leading to it. You have to fight traffic on Cleveland Road. And so it's not unreasonable for people to be looking at this askance because they're not real comfortable with what's going on. The business of I'll pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today is just is tough for folks to swallow continuously. I don't doubt at least I am certainly committed to the entire pathway and ensuring that the citizens get value from this. But I just want to say I understand folks having hard questions about this because there's quite a few things a lot of money's going out and on projects that not a lot of people seem to be getting benefit from immediately. And it may be a portion of just communication, but I understand the questions that have come up from the citizens, and I appreciate them keeping us on task. Yes, I support this.
And I think that's a fair point.
Only on faith. I support this because I'm trusting you, that this is going to be okay.
And to add to why I think that faith is appropriate, because I think you need to test it. It's okay. What I often say to opposing counsel who want to see certain documents and ask certain questions is, it's okay. St. Thomas was a saint also, and he had his doubts and he wanted his proof. Now I sometimes get chastised for that, but as a theological matter, but it's true. And I think here, if we're simply asking people to take it on blind faith, that would be right. But we have adopted a bicentennial plan that is the product of a lot of public input, says this pathway is really important to us, and then we have a capital plan that provides the funding for it. So I think, I appreciate your support of it, and I think your faith is well-founded. Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Crosser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the resolution?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd? Yes. Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Item number 2.
Item 2 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into an amendment to the professional services agreement and sub-grant agreement with Foth Infrastructure and Environment LLC of Des Prairies, Wisconsin for the Sandusky Bay Initiative Area 1 and 2 projects, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Got a motion and second. Discussion. Ryan, perhaps you could give the commission and the folks at home an update on where we are with this project and what these two pieces of legislation do, because you've got two ordinances here that are related, and perhaps you could address both at the same time.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, thank you. I think the best way to start with these two projects is to backtrack a little bit to the $1 million that was granted to the city of Sandusky last year through ODNR and Ohio EPA to do what is called the Sandusky Bay Initiative, which that project was, the catalyst for these projects is the state requirement to no longer dispose of dredgings in the open lake. They wanted to find a beneficial reuse for them. So the state gave Sandusky $1 million to do design of 3 different projects. The project sites that were selected, the first one is, Project 1 is out by Cold Creek on the west end of town, and it runs from about Edgewater all the way to the corporation limit on the west end. The second project, and I get the name wrong, but it's just southwest of Carafaloo Island, the one just off Cedar Point Causeway. Cafferloo?
Kelly doesn't live here.
Cafferloo Island.
You must be the only person around that doesn't have a title to that. Tell you a story about that.
So, and that one's just southwest of there, along the shoreline there as well. And the third one is in East Sandusky Bay, near the Griffin Airport site at Heminger Ditch. Not only do these projects take into the beneficial reuse component, but there's a lot of other components to it as well. And the two of the most important ones are the habitat restoration, bringing back areas for fish to spawn, for plants to grow, natural plants, not invasive species, but also for nutrient reduction, phosphorus and nitrogen for algae, to reduce the algae growth in Sandusky Bay. So these projects, we've had a lot of public involvement, a lot of public input. We've had Shores and Islands and other entities involved in the planning process of this to say, if we're doing this project and we're implementing this project, which ultimately is looked at as coastal wetlands, coastal marshes. So it's not anything on land and it's not anything out in the bay or in the lake. It's all along the coast, just off the coast, within that coastal area along the waterfront, to create these zones to treat the water before it gets into the bay. And, you know, one of the things that we have maintained a focus on, and one of the things that's good about the city leading the charge on these projects, is that we're also bringing in the economic development component of it, or that component of how can we get the paddle sports that the city is promoting and the public access and all those other things, how can we make this enticing to those entities as well? So we're looking at these projects, and on projects 1 and 2, we've signed that contract with Foth already. And Foth, who is a recent resident of downtown Sandusky within the last 8 months, we saw an article in the Register on that. They are getting an additional $20,000. There was quite a bit of additional stakeholder involvement, public involvement with those science groups, and doing additional meetings to make sure that we got the science right on their 2 projects. Project 3 was an additional $74,000, $75,000. And that took a lot more modeling of the water systems throughout all of East Sandusky Bay. It was a lot more complicated than previously anticipated, and those stakeholder meetings as well. Project 1 and 2 are about 25% complete. We're hoping for complete design around April, May timeframe. And Project 3 is about 75% complete. We have a meeting in 2 weeks on that 75% complete design document. So the first couple projects, the funding looks a little high for the construction, but the state, coastal office is really actively pursuing how to break these projects down into phases so these can be implemented over several year time frame.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Commissioners, questions or comments? Now, I have to tell you a story about Cafferloo. Ms. Platt, you seem to know something about Cafferloo, too. The legend, as I recall it, this is the island that Point Causeway goes over. It belongs to the state of Ohio, but there is an easement there to allow the causeway to go over it. The legend was that, I can't remember the fellow's last name, but every weekend he would row out to the spot where Cafferloo was formed to dump trash and stone, and it was named after his 3 daughters, Kathleen, Frances, and Louise. Now, maybe, Ms. Platt, you remember the gentleman's last name. I can't at the moment. I laugh because when I was just in practice, there had been a lawyer some years earlier who had retired, but I'd met him. Very colorful person. The law never caught up with him. He's since deceased. But he sold more quitclaim deeds for Cafferloo Island than you can imagine. And it seemed like every year for a long time, there would be a couple that would come in and they would want to know how Cedar Point could build that causeway over their island because they had a deed that said it belonged to them. Of course, these were quitclaim deeds sold for $100, and if you know a quitclaim deed just says, I'm selling you whatever I have. He didn't have anything. He'd get disbarred today, but he was pretty colorful. Anyway, that's the story as I know it of Cafferloo Island. Unless there are additional questions or comments, Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 3, please.
Item 3 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into amendment to the professional services agreement and sub-grant agreement with Biohabitats Incorporated of Baltimore, Maryland for the Sandusky Bay Initiative Area 3 project and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of rules appropriate to section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
And a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 4, please.
Item 4 is an ordinance appropriating funds for the dumping of Class B biosolids and other dewatered and compressed solids from the wastewater treatment plant at the Erie County Sanitary Landfill for calendar year 2018 and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed? I know it's not the most exciting piece of legislation, but we do need to dispose of it.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Poole.
Just a question in terms of, why did it go up so much from 118 to 161,000? Why you projected it would cost so much more? Or did I just misunderstand what I read?
Through you, Mr. President, what we do in years past, I think the highest we've been up to is just over 133,000, 132,000. We just want to make sure we have the money there in case we get a big year with receiving extra waste or cleaning sewers with these big projects that we have coming up. We just make sure that it's budgeted.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry that over the dinner hour, we have to discuss sludge cakes. Perhaps next year I should put this on the consent agenda, but we'll see. Any other questions or comments?
I'm gonna ask you to see it again if it's a large number.
Well, that's a
If there's a big jump, I'm gonna ask anyway.
Right. That's why I put it on. I mean, it's one of the things we have to do, but I put it on the regular agenda because it's a big number.
Yeah, they might have raised the rate on us or something, then I'd have been unhappy.
Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 5, please.
Item 5 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager and/or the finance director to expend funds for the emergency purchase and installation of a transfer switch at the wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $21,937 and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mrs. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 6, please.
Item 6 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a contract with Edgar, Doolin Company of Sandusky, Ohio for the Campbell Street Resurfacing and Columbus-Scott-Campbell intersection project, phases 1 and 2, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
It's been a motion and second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Brady?
asked that Mr. Klein give us a brief overview on this project, specifically because of the fact that we're going to get a repaved road and this has grown a bit because of sewer and water additions, and yet we're not, this does not include the signalization of the intersection at Campbell and Perkins, and I want to make that very clear that there is going to be more to be done when we're done.
Sure. Through Mr. President, this is the resurfacing of Campbell Street project that we got OPWC dollars for last year. If you recall, we also got some active transportation money for $125,000, but that money is intended to be only used at the intersection on pedestrian improvements and signalization improvements within that intersection. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the two funding sources, the timing of both of them to line up. So we have to bid out the first phase of it so we can utilize those funds. And then afterwards, in July, when the other funds become available, we can utilize those. So that's why we're doing this project. We're resurfacing from the railroad all the way to Columbus on Campbell. We're also, last fall, we found that there was some sewer work that needed to be done. We also had a couple water lines that needed to be replaced as well. So all of those things together with the sewer and water, it increased that original project, and we do anticipate coming back in the summer months to bid out that second phase of the project, which would be the pedestrian improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Questions or comments, commissioners?
Just a question, sir.
Ms. Poole?
How much of an improvement are we getting to water and sewer? I'm just interested in doing good things with water and sewer.
Yeah, through Mr. President. On the sewer line, we are replacing one of the manholes, and we are lining the majority of the 15-inch sewer that's out there. When we cambered it, there were a ton of leaks through it. On the water line, there's a loop that goes underneath the railroad that needed to be replaced. That's why one of the hydrants on North Depot is actually off. We need to make sure that we put that back in service. Plus, there's a line that's 4 inches on the north end of the project, a water line, and those are no longer acceptable by EPA, so we have to replace that with an 8-inch line.
Is it reasonable to expect then that the service to folks that are working off that 4-inch line, that they're going to see an improvement in service?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Last thing, your future plans for these lights, are they going to be new quality lights, not 1950s like you did?
Yes.
Okay, I'll vote yes then.
Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 7, please.
Item 7 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to expend funds for the purchase and installation of a new roof for the Big Island Waterworks Administration Building from Duro-Last Roofing Incorporated of Saginaw, Michigan, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
There's been a motion, and second, discussion. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 8, please.
Item 8 is an ordinance authorizing and approving a facade grant in the amount of $25,000 to H2 Property Management LLC in relation to the property located at 225 West Water Street and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Twine?
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Been a motion, and second, discussion. Ms. Muratori? Oh, just that fast. You're good. Could you present to the commission and the public the legislation we're undertaking?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. And members of the commission, tonight, we'll be considering a grant for H2 Property Management. Megan and Richard Hography are equal owners of H2 Property Management, and through that company, they manage the mixed-use property at 225 West Water Street, in addition to other commercial properties throughout the city. Mike Salman, H2's general manager, is their representative tonight, as they are flying in on a plane, I think, as we speak. So here are just pictures of 225 West Water Street, the current exterior. This is pictures of both the south and north elevation of the building in its current state. And then here are some renderings of the south, west, and north elevation. The project includes replacing all of the windows with historically accurate aluminum-clad units, replacing damaged and deteriorated wood panels with fiber cement, installing full-height window units on the first floor level, and painting the ground-level storefronts. Beyond the scope of the project, they have already replaced the roof, and they are upgrading the interior units as the tenants turn over. And I just wanted to show some pictures of the interior, even though that's not really part of the scope of the project, just to give everybody a sense of what the units are like on the inside. There are 7 residential units, 6 one-bedroom and 1 two-bedroom unit, and there are commercial properties that house H2's office, Carrington Arts, and there is a vacancy in there as well. On the inside, it's recently been updated. Both common areas have been updated, laundry rooms, replacing new washer and dryers, new floors, new painting. They've also added some security measures, including cameras and keyless security locks on the doors for extra security on each floor. And again, they're updating the units before they get new renters with repainting, new carpet, new flooring, and new appliances when needed. They've also invested in new furnaces and air conditioning units, and as I mentioned earlier, a roof. The total project cost for the scope of this project, which includes windows, storefront paint, and architecture fees, is over $232,000. And the recommended facade grant is approved at the February 13th, 2018 Economic Development Incentive Committee meeting is $35,000. This is 15% of the project costs and leverages private funds 6.6 times. Project will be completed expected no later than June 30th of this year. Just want to thank you and say that this project does help maintain a large historic building in the business district in a historically appropriate manner. And Megan and Rick Hography, they've purchased 9 buildings in Sandusky, and they continue to invest substantially in improving these projects.
Thank you, Ms. Muratori. Commissioners, questions or comments for Ms. Muratori or otherwise?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Brady.
Mr. Murtry, I noticed that in your entire presentation, none of the improvements included any electrical work. And I'm going to presume that the reason for that is because that electrical is in as fine a shape as the day that I put it in 1980, for Uncle Jim Birch. So I want to compliment the Hographies on purchasing the property. You got a fine piece of property, well wired.
Okay.
Is that self-serving?
It's beyond that. Additional questions or comments? Then, Mrs. Crutcher, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady? Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 9, please.
Item 9 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed Cdbg fiscal year 2017 demolition project number 2 and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Got a motion, second, discussion. Glasgow, more buildings coming down. It seems as though you and your staff have done a very careful job of separating out those that have a chance at some future use. We saw the first-time homebuyer program tonight was very successful in that regard, and some of the other grants available for homeowners. And I appreciate that. We now have quite a few properties that have been turned over from the land bank. Instead of just being demolished, they are actually being occupied these days. That's a great thing to see. Anything more you'd like to add about this particular piece of legislation?
Sure. Through you, Mr. President, to members of the commission. I think we've, based on what we've heard from the public and the direction from the commission, I think we've taken a pretty aggressive stance on blight elimination, but also making sure that we balance that where appropriate with rehabilitation. Going back to 2015, I believe we only did about 7 residential demolitions between the city and our county partner at the county land bank. We did 39 demolitions in 2016 and 44 demolitions last year. And that is not touching commercial or industrial. And that's also not addressing the 40 voluntary demolitions that we have been able to achieve either through code compliance or actually one of the eligible uses through our housing programs is demolition where necessary. So I know we started with about 30 300 properties, excuse me. We've tackled about a third of that through demolition by the city or the county, another 40 voluntarily. So just through those sources alone, we're about halfway there. And that's not taking into consideration what folks have done voluntarily to rehabilitate their property. So this is sort of just the next step at taking our next batch. And we are very careful working with our code department to prioritize. We do have several more properties that are condemned. And through the conversations with the community and the code department, we do sort of prioritize though each time we put out to demolition. So one of the things I will want to note, just so the public knows, we do have 5 alternates that are noted on this communication. The reason for that is we're sitting on about $80,000 in Cdbg funds for the rest of the program year. We want to make sure that we use that up and don't leave any on the table. So we wanted to make sure that we sort of overbid the number of properties. So although we've listed 11, it may only be 9 or 10 based on how the bids come in. So those alternates are noted in the communication.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lasko. Commissioners, additional questions or comments? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Resolution?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Item number 10, please.
Item 10 is a resolution approving and accepting the petition of John and Adrian O'Donnell LLC, doing business as Imagine Baking Incorporated, for special energy improvement projects in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code, Chapters 727 and 1710, authorizing and directing the city manager to execute an energy project agreement in relation to the special energy improvement projects, declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Lloyd?
I move for the adoption of this resolution under the suspension of the rules and in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Lasko, I know you can probably walk us through this. I know Ms. Snyder is here from the Toledo Port Authority, and you may be able to help us. Between the two of you, I don't know who would be best to explain the two related pieces of legislation we're about to undertake. I'll leave that to you folks to tell us.
Sure, Mr. President. I'll maybe start, and then where appropriate, if there's gaps for Ms. Snyder to fill in, I think that'd be most appropriate, particularly about the sort of program in general. But just to remind the commission, in 2016, the city created an energy special improvement district, actually through the Hotel Kilbourne project. And although that project ultimately didn't end up using the energy district financing, what it did do is create the district. So we were glad to have that in place. Since then, you can add additional projects that are doing energy special improvement type scopes of work, everything from LED lighting to mechanical improvements, et cetera. But every time one of those projects is going to utilize port financing through the ESID, it actually has to be brought to the Energy Special Improvement District Board, which is a group of 5 members within the community. Some that were Hotel Kilbourne project participants, but then also city representation. And once a project is approved by the board, it is presented to the city commission in sort of 3 means of legislation, the first 2 of which are being considered tonight. The first is what's called a resolution of necessity, which is basically the city accepting the petition from this particular project, which is Imagine Baking, to undertake their ESID project. Then the second would be an order from the city to order the project to proceed with closing financing and starting the project. Ultimately, when the construction project is complete, we would bring a third piece of legislation back to the commission, which would be the order to levy. And the way that works is, as opposed to a traditional loan where there's a mortgage on the property and that is paid back just through mortgage payments from the project, the way that this loan is paid back is actually through real estate tax assessments that are levied, and those assessments are sent back to the port as repayment on the loan. And then just to speak about the project in particular, Imagine Baking through this particular project is looking about $362,000 in improvements, which is mainly replacement of lighting with LED lighting, much needed roof replacements, and then also some equipment purchases as well. And what's really great about this project is this is sort of the second recent major investment by Imagine Baking. There was some financial assistance provided by the city about 18 months ago that allowed them to do some dock improvements, some other roof replacement improvements, and then a separating wall that allowed them to expand their lines within the company. So we're excited to see them back making a reinvestment. And with that, I may turn it over to Ms. Snyder if she has anything to fill in the gaps with.
Thank you. I would just share that we're very excited to have this project come forward. It is a perfect, do I need to go with the microphone? Is that-
If you could go at any length, you might be better
Okay,
off.
I won't
Yes.
go in late, I
Okay.
promise you, because I understand that it's coming along, but.
No, this is important. Take your time and explain what you think you need to
Yeah,
explain.
it's really exciting for your community. Not only this project, but now any business within the city of Sandusky can to apply to us for funds. I was looking at that project that just came up for the facade, and I thought, that's a perfect energy project. We could have helped to do those windows, or do the, building envelope. It's nice for downtown districts because smaller businesses can take advantage of this funding source. This is a large business, it's a large project. I can do projects as low as $25,000. So it really opens the gamut up to help communities such as yours to have a new source of capital that can help your businesses to reinvest in their asset and improve the energy efficiency at the same time. So we're very excited to be able to have the first project come forward and look forward to additional projects coming. The other thing that's important to note is that municipalities can use this. I'm looking at your lights in this room, and I'm thinking this would be a great building for the municipality to use. Yeah, oh, okay. So, but municipalities can use this resource also to do capital improvements. And so it's another source of capital, not just for the businesses, but the municipality, nonprofit, for-profit, small business, large business. 25,000 to 9 million is my bandwidth. Are there specific questions?
Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Poole.
I wanted to say, just of all, thank you to John and Adrian O'Donnell and Imagine Baking. That is a great asset for that neighborhood. They have been great corporate citizens for that area. It's great to have a business in town where folks in that neighborhood can walk to work. You don't need to take the bus. You don't have to go out in Perkins Township. And for them to invest more into that building just talks about the fact that they plan to stay. And I'm just really pleased and happy that they're taking advantage of this.
It really is great to have a manufacturing investment here in town. And I just want to take a minute to make a plug because Mr. Waddington serves as our representative on that board. And he was sharing me some of the details. What you're able to provide is a fixed interest rate of 5% for 15 years. Go out in the banking right now and try and get that kind of rate.
Yeah.
You won't find it, period. That is a great deal for any business that's interested in this. And I'll say again, I might not have discussed this before, but it may have been, I think, in the paper, but we put in a solar array on our own office building. Would have loved to have had that available because the banks at the time did not know how to lend to that project. It just
They still don't, sir.
it got them all mixed up. That's right.
Still don't.
So this is a plug to other businesses. Our return on investment is 17% on that solar array,
Yeah.
and that's a great deal. And I think this is something that every business that has a large roof like that should really be taking advantage of, or whether it's lighting upgrades or whatever it is, it makes economic sense. So it's green in both senses. So thank you for your partnership. Additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
I think I brought up when we met a week and a half ago, Mrs. Snyder, I would like to see the city look at our wastewater plant and water plant for solar panels for up there to help out defer some of that cost. I know you said it goes, 20 years?
You gotta figure out.
Yeah, for a municipality, we can do tax exempt, we use bond financing on the back end of this. This is the way we fund these as a port authority. So we use our own capital, and for municipalities, we can use the tax exempt bond mechanism, and we can go up to 20 years on that. You may want to look, we did a model, we've done a solar array for a water treatment plant in Toledo. The Collins Park was a large solar array that was done early on in our program, and we've done 55 buildings for the city of Toledo and half a dozen other municipalities around the region. So we have a track record of doing this as a municipal partner, as a public-public relationship.
Thank you. I hope our city manager has a coffee with me about this. Like to move that one?
I think you probably make that happen. Additional questions or comments? Mrs. Crosser, thank you. Mrs. Crosser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
And now on the resolution.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. And the companion legislation, please, Mrs. Cresser, would you present that?
Yes, this is an ordinance determining to proceed with certain John and Adrian O'Donnell Special Energy Improvement Projects by way of special assessments in accordance with chapters 1710 and 727 of the Ohio Revised Code, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Chairman,
Ms. Twine.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under the suspension of the rules in full accordance with section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Been a motion, second, discussion. Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Now on the ordinance?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. That concludes our regular items of business, and we turn to Mr. Wilson for his report.
Thank you, Commissioners, audience, and staff. I will start with the donations. First, a $300 donation to the K-9 Fund was received from the Sandusky Rotary Club. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Rotary Club.
Thank you. Second, a $50 donation to the Kenny Jensen Memorial Tree Fund received from James Gossard Jr. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved without objection.
Moving on to new and old business with the fire department. The fire department will be joining the Erie County Senior Center for a rally through downtown Sandusky to recognize the many volunteers who deliver meals daily to our homebound seniors. We have some folks from the senior center still here. It's exciting. Moving on to finance. The 2018 Appropriations Ordinance will be on the agenda for the March 12th and March 26th City Commission meetings. I'm requesting that a public hearing be set for the March 12th meeting on the 2018 budget. I need a motion for that. Could I have a motion to set that hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion be approved. Hearing no objection, the motion is approved and the hearing is set.
Also, the next scheduled Finance Committee meeting is Friday, March 23rd, 2018, at 7:45 a.m. in the Commission Chambers. Moving on to the Department of Public Works. As was covered in the Register, the boy with the boot has been removed from his perch in Washington Park to be stripped, refurbished, and repainted. He will be returned within a couple months as we get to the height of the bicentennial celebrations, of which the boot is obviously a prominent part. Also, as a result of the city's involvement with the Erie Hack Competition, Internet of Water, and the Sandusky Bay Initiatives, the city is the only local government that has been asked to join an extensive network of partners, including Ohio State, Heidelberg, Case Western Reserve, Bowling Green, Kent State, GLOS, and Limnotech as a potential sub-awardee of the Smart Lake Erie proposal to be submitted to the National Science Foundation Smart and Connected Communities Program. This proposal, spearheaded by the Cleveland Water Alliance and Ohio Sea Grant, aims to leverage new smart and connected technology in Sandusky Bay and the Sandusky River watershed to impact the threats posed by nutrient pollution and harmful algae, improving local quality of life by reducing public health risks, increasing access to amenities, and stimulating economic activity. And I want to thank Director Klein, who's been very much spearheading that from our end and has developed quite a relationship with the Cleveland Water Alliance, and we hope to continue that as we move forward with more Sandusky Bay initiatives and other like projects. Also, staff will be accepting qualifications through the normal design-build RFQ process for the Jackson Street Pier and Shoreline Drive projects. This will allow the city additional time to review design-build teams to ensure we select the appropriate firms to be shortlisted for the proposal phase of the selection process. There is no financial or design commitment during the selection process. Also, a reminder to please go to the Customer Accounting Office on the first floor of City Hall if you're interested in signing up for the Yard Waste Program. And another reminder that residents are able to report potholes by visiting the city's website. The link to report potholes is located on the right-hand side of the home page, which I believe is www.ci.sandusky.oh.us. It's a mouthful. Is there another?
cityofsandusky.com.
cityofsandusky.com will also work for that. Moving on to the planning department, the 2018 Safe Routes to Schools Non-Infrastructure Grant Application. The planning department looks to apply for grant funding through the 2018 Safe Routes to Schools Grant Program for a non-infrastructure project to include bicycle education, as well as possible low-cost bicycle and pedestrian safety countermeasures. The grant application is due March 5th. Do we need a resolution for that, Angie? Do we need a motion? I'd like to ask for a motion to apply for the 2018 Safe Routes to Schools Non-Infrastructure Grant Application.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved.
Thank you. The regular Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 28th at 4:30 PM in the first floor conference room. Also, the Landmark Commission meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 28th, immediately following the Planning Commission meeting. The regular Board of Zoning Appeals meeting will be held Thursday, March 15th at 4:30 PM in the first floor conference room. Also, moving on to recreation, the Recreation Department will offer its first spring break camp for K through 12th grade students from 9:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. on March 26th through 29th in Sandusky High School's gymnasium and cafeteria. Again, this will be our first spring break camp for K through 12th graders at 9:30 to 1 p.m. on March 26th through the 29th. In the Sandusky High School gym and cafeteria. The camp will be limited to 75 participants per day, and pre-registration is encouraged. Contact Youth Program Supervisor Tondra Frisbee at 419-627-5888 or at tfrisbee, TFRISBY, at ci.sandusky.oh.us. And this is a very exciting partnership, obviously, between our recreation department and the schools to hopefully give kids some productive and enriching things to do over spring break. It is the first, and wouldn't be possible without our new youth program supervisor, Tondra Frisbee. So she's already paying dividends and, building new relationships that we're thankful for. And then finally, the city's annual Easter egg hunt will be at 10 a.m. on Saturday, March 31st in Washington Park for children under 8, and after which a showing of Zootopia at 11 a.m. at the Sandusky State Theater. So the Easter egg hunt will be at 10 a.m. on March 31st at Washington Park for children under 8, and will be followed with a free showing of Zootopia at 11 a.m. at the Sandusky State Theater. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfster. Commissioners, any questions or comments for Mr. Wolfster? Then we will turn to old business. Any items of old business?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lockhart.
I attended this past Thursday the meet and greet with the Gartland Avenue reconstruction project. And I just want to congratulate and thank the engineering department, Ed, Megan, and Jane Cullen did a terrific job of explaining and alleviating all the concerns of the citizens that were there. There's probably 24 that were there, so they did a really, really fantastic job. So everybody seems to be pretty happy with what's going on over there. That's going to be a great project moving forward.
Okay. Other items of old business? Items of new business?
Mr. Chairman,
Grady.
it is my distinct honor to ask for a motion for an executive session for the purchase or sale of property.
No, you make a motion. I ask for a motion, so. Is that a motion then, Mr. Grady?
That is a motion.
I tried to catch up. I was still down 2-1. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? Ms. Cressy, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Ms. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
That executive session is set. Any other items of new business? And we will turn to audience participation. Anyone wishing to address the commission, please step to the mic.
Excuse me, Mr. Murray?
Yes.
One more public hearing set for March 26th.
I apologize. You did give me a cheat sheet and I
It's okay.
overlooked it. So, Brady, I would appreciate a motion. I'd ask for a motion to set a public hearing on March 26th at 5 p.m. regarding a proposed zoning amendment for 301 Superior Street.
I should like to make that motion.
Second.
There's been a motion and second discussion.
What is it?
It's a
What do we
proposed
change it?
zoning amendment
Yeah,
for
for
301, that's all the information I have. So we set the hearing up and then we'll see what happens.
About,
It's for the Ability Works property for,
Superior Street.
yes.
Okay,
For the
thank you.
health department for their renovation of it.
Further discussion? Without objection, the hearing will be set and the motion will be passed, and hearing no objection, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Kress, for reminding me. I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, please.
Sharon Johnson, again, 1139 Fifth Street. I attended the Finance Committee Friday, and it was disheartened to hear what they want to do with the Issue 8 infrastructure account. We're still putting our hand to that account. They want to divide Issue 8 infrastructure into 4 categories. One is vehicle replacement, and these are yearly amounts that I'm telling you about that they want to take out yearly. Vehicle replacement, $145,000 out of the infrastructure account. Parks and Rec, $325,000. Planning, Special Projects, Public Art Program, $45,000. And last but not least, streets, trees, and sidewalks at $985,000. Now, that $985,000 has to be split 3 ways with those trees, sidewalks, and streets, so it doesn't leave much for streets at all. You guys should be ashamed of yourself. This is awful. I just can't believe this. There's not going to be anything left of this infrastructure account at all. And for you to take $500,000 and put it in a pathway over on Cleveland Road, out of that infrastructure account will come out $300,000 for that. That is precedence over our streets. Our streets are in deplorable shape. You can hardly drive on them. I just really think you need to rethink this. People are going to get so angry about this. They'll take back Issue 8.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Poole.
May I ask if this is apparently going to be a recommendation of some sort or from the Finance Committee? And what I'm leading to is, would it be appropriate, since I don't know, and I would have some questions to understand that, could the staff just give us a presentation that explains why this is a good idea, what they're trying to accomplish? Some future meeting, and just explain that, because infrastructure, that in terms of how you're using it, makes a big difference. Infrastructure is something that these broad general titles don't seem to, they seem to spread that a little bit. So I would like to have a presentation.
I think that would be good, Mr. Swopser, if we could have that presentation maybe at the next meeting or in connection with the budgeting process. Because there is some confusion about what constitutes infrastructure. Of course, most of the way that we get the job done in the city is with the people and the vehicles are very much infrastructure in any business or in any government. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. I realize always at this time of year, after we've had some thaws and the potholes are obvious after the pretty hard winter this year, that our focus naturally turns to streets. I think of it as well. I did see the crews out there patching yesterday and today. By the way, that Duro-Patch experiment that you inadvertently did on Meg Street is amazing. I don't know if you've seen that. So most of Meg Street has the old patching. There are spots of it that have the new Duro-Patch, which is much more yielding or elastic or whatever it is. That part held up really well over the winter. And then there are, of course, all sorts of other buckets that go, of money that go into streets. This is just the money that's coming from the Issue 8 dollars. So, but putting that all in a package would be helpful, because if we end up spending a lot of money on streets, and we do that because we have the ability to leverage the local dollars that we have in order to be able to pull down state dollars. So, but I think a more complete conversation that's prepared in advance would be helpful.
Certainly, and can I, really, through the commission president to Commissioner Poole, is ultimately this is a process through which Erin and others who use infrastructure and Director Solloway have been trying to better and more transparently explain where Issue 8 capital dollars are going. So it's not necessarily a departure of how we budget the dollars. It's actually meant to be a more clear explanation for the public as to where those dollars are. And in addition to that, you said there are sources. So Issue 8 is one source of capital. We also have the capital fund and Cdbg, as well as other sources that are local, like stormwater for modest amounts of that. And then we do try to leverage through using that to apply for state and federal transportation dollars, other dollars, and all of that collectively is what makes up the capital budget that is presented in an even higher level of detail to the commission and to the community every year. But we will absolutely, as part of that capital or budget presentation, build in a piece that kind of clearly explains that. And one thing that we just always remind people is the actual campaign pledge from the commission based on the Issue 8 estimates was that $750,000 annually would go towards local infrastructure, and it listed specifically streets, trees, sidewalks, and parks. Obviously, the $1.2 million commitment through the parks, and then that section that Sharon mentioned that includes trees, sidewalks, and streets is well above that $750,000, and that's not the only amount that goes in. So we have, as the economy has improved and the amount of income tax collections has gone up, not only met the initial public projections, but actually exceeded them by nearly 50%, so.
Mr. Chairman, before we go forward, so you understand this conversation, what you're trying and attempting to do is one thing, and as you just described, infrastructure was described in some terms that you have now expanded. So the concept is whether or not the citizens agree that a truck is no longer capital equipment, it is now infrastructure. And you need to convince, that's where this conversation needs to provide clarity. You would like to spend money on things that when folks voted, that's not what they were thinking. And it doesn't mean that what you transpose this into isn't a good idea. But it needs to be brought to the public so that we're willing to accept that, yes, well, trucks every year is going to be considered infrastructure, and we will wait to get our sidewalks, trees, and streets, which is what you presented that people voted in for. Okay, and we as a commission get to sell that to the public if we want to get voted in later, but I need to understand it, and that's why I ask you to explain it, to see whether I support it or not.
Absolutely.
Additional, anyone else wishing to address the commission?
My name is Marcy Platt. I live at 1217 Columbus Avenue. I've addressed the commission in the past, so I know most of you. At a Saturday commission coffee with commissioners about 2 months ago, I brought up the fact that there is a semi-permanent sign that says downtown that is between Monroe Street and 5 Points. That is nowhere near downtown. In fact, everybody sitting around the thing said, yeah, that's not downtown. Downtown, in fact, Mr. Brady, you asked me, where do you think downtown starts? And I said, well, I don't know. And you said, what about West Adams? I said, yeah, that's about it, where the library's at. There's also another semi-permanent bricked-in sign that is in front of the Cameo. That's not downtown either. When I asked Mr. Brady at Coffee with Commissioners a couple weeks ago, he told me that those signs are not going to be taken down and moved. Those are very expensive signs. Someone made a mistake. I think that if we're going to ask the taxpayers to be paying for things, that we need to at least be correct in our placement of them. I know a lot of people have other problems with some of the signs and what they say, and you have said all along, well, once the warm weather hits, we're going to take a look at the signs or whatever. But how expensive could it be to relocate those signs? Can't be that expensive. You screw up a job, you change it. Right? I mean, if somebody came to your property and put it in the wrong spot, wouldn't you want to change it? I mean, we can at least be accurate about where the downtown in Sandusky is, and I'm a little bit concerned who you had do it that didn't know where the downtown was at. And Mr. Zuloff said that one of the reasons is that it was a fault between the administrations. But it would just, brings up a lot of conversation. You guys are doing a lot of projects that are gonna supposedly pay dividends based on faith. 5, 10, 15 years. As a citizen of Sandusky, I'm asking you to get something right now. I can't see what this Bay pathway is going to be. That's the other thing I want to bring up. The original Sandusky Bay pathway that included sports zone included a citizen, a public area. The original drawing, if you look it up in the Sandusky Register and they bring up the right one, there was a public area where you could go and there would be picnic tables, and the idea is you could walk around it. Whatever happened to that picture? That was the original picture that was in there. And now if I would go on the sports zone, I'm sure they would come and escort me off, right? And so I'm a little bit concerned about why are we paying $570,000, whatever it is, for access to what we were already told we were going to have. And my other question is, you've got a lot of hurdles on that program. You've got to convince the boat owners that they can have a bridge that's going to allow that to go through. You've got to tell a gated area that it's going to go through their area. There were a lot of people upset, for the people that weren't there at the initial community meeting at Quaker Steak and Lube about this project. It doesn't do the city of Sandusky any good to have a project that starts around Pipe Street and goes to where the old airport was at. You got to get there first. So my question is, what happened to the initial idea with Cedar Point that they were going to give us public access to the north part where the bay is at? Those are my only other question is, it's great we're demolishing anything. When are we going to see something built? 10 houses went today. 1 was built. Where are the jobs coming that's going to support the middle class of Sandusky? I've been to a lot of these meetings where people pat themselves on the back when the only place those jobs are going are from Route 250 south of Perkins Ave over to Venice Road. That's not a substantial amount of jobs. And so my challenge for this administration is, where are the jobs coming? That jobs that allow people to go and buy this land. Grondin's probably already lived in Sandusky. They're probably moving from one part of Sandusky out to where those housing projects are at. So those are my questions for the city. I'd like to see you get something for the people of Sandusky. I'm just like everybody else. My uncle came from Columbus. He drove down one of the streets. The potholes were so bad. He said, you know what? I'm not spending my money to go downtown to get dinner or lunch. I'm staying on 250 where I'm not going to ruin my car. And that is a true story. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whoopser, there's some confusion, I think, about the nature of the park that is being considered in the old Griffin property. We were addressing just the access point and the grant for some of those dollars, but I would understand from past presentations that the whole notion of public access and picnicking and walking and other activities is all still a part of this process.
Through the commission president, absolutely. I think this is the first step of helping to realize that vision, and the road being built by Cedar Point, in addition to providing not only access to the phase 2 of the sports center project, also provides the pathway and parking and access to the place where the park will be, as well as extending some utilities out that way so that things like amenities like restrooms, et cetera, could be brought out there so that people can enjoy this. So this is actually, I would argue, the first step of the realization of that phase. And while certainly we have been in partnership with Cedar Fair and the Metro Park from the beginning, the Cedar Fair commitment to this was that they would donate the land that they own for public use and enjoyment as a park, so long as the city and the Metro Parks partnered with them to actually create that space and maintain it. And so, we don't think any promises as it relates to that project have been, not seen through. We think that this is actually the first step towards actually, and hopefully with a sense of urgency, getting it done as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Foster. Anyone else wishing to address the commission? If not, then we will take a 3-minute recess and resume for executive session. 2 minutes. Mr. Waddington says